How many Mr. Pickles will it get? Let's see if this cabinet has what it takes.
Video Game Vegas.
He's so cute.
Friends, Video Game Vegas. And this is my review of the Rec Room Masters 3/4 scale arcade cabinet, the Alpha-Cade, also known as my Berzerk cabinet. I base my arcade cabinet reviews on 10 categories, which you'll find detailed in the text below. For each positive in a category, or more positive than negative in a category, I'll score it a Mr. Pickle. The more Mr. Pickles it gets, of course, the better. Based upon the total score and my overall thoughts, I'll recommend if you should get it, vet it, or in other words, put it through its paces in person before you buy, or forget it. A couple of disclaimers before I get into my review. All my product reviews are based solely upon the item or items I receive. Some may get the same product and have no issues. Some may have more issues than I did. And maybe I get no issues at all. My hope for any product. Or maybe a majority of the specific product performs or presents differently than the one I got. But when it comes down to it, what I get is what I review. I don't acquiesce to excuses like, I must have gotten a bad one, or a good one, or ruminate shipping issues if I had it shipped, though I may note something. But plainly put, I'm an advocate for good quality with a strong emphasis towards quality control. And if a company wants their product seen favorably, then they need to make this a paramount part of their philosophy and put it to action. So what every customer receives is an acceptable, if not preferred, exceptional experience every time. Some may think it unfair not to put a more significant emphasis on the law of averages, and I appreciate that opinion. But my reviews are meant to tell my experience on exactly what I got, good or bad. Second, the footage presented in my videos of arcade cabinets I review or showcase may contain updated parts, decorations, software, or other bits and bobs not included in a standard purchase. Please make sure to check advertised listings or reach out to retailers or companies to confirm complete contents in box. Now let's get to it. To help you understand the importance of the game Berzerk to me, I have to take you back to where it all began. A rough reenactment, if you will. Back when I was a lad, my mom took me and my brother to the Buckingham Square Mall. A very cool mall back in the day, unfortunately no longer with us, and we decided to take in a movie while we were there. I don't remember the movie per se, but I do remember the chills that ran all the way through me when I suddenly heard the voices of Cylons. What are Cylons, you ask? Evil robots who relentlessly hunted down the human race back in 1978's sci-fi show, Battlestar Galactica. The sounds were coming from an ominous arcade machine in the middle of the lobby. I stepped towards it and looked in awe as the guy playing it blasted away at an armada of yellow Cylons in a blue maze. The voices of the Cylons taunted him, their evil cyclopean eyes moving eerily like the ones in the TV show. But he made short work of them and moved on to the next maze. In the next maze, the Cylons were now red, and this time they were able to shoot at him. A precarious twist he wasn't ready for, as he got blasted by one. Starting again, he compensated for this new trick by skillfully dodging, but on one of his dodge attempts, he ended up touching one of the walls, and unfortunately, the walls were electrified. Suffice it to say, his character didn't survive the shock. Spawning again, he made his way more carefully this time, adjusting to these new discoveries, but in doing so, he took a little bit too much time. A smiley face then appeared on the screen and started to bounce towards him. Was it friendly? Look at that smile. But he wasn't taking any chances, so he made several attempts to shoot at it, but it wouldn't die and just kept coming, smiling all the way. He finally tried to desperately escape, but it was too late. The smile was but a ruse. This was the evil Otto, and it gleefully ended his run. I wanted to get in on the action, but it was movie time. After the movie, however, my mom gave me a quarter to play. I also found myself getting destroyed by the army of second stage red Cylons and that damn smiley face. But I vowed to return and claim victory. Little did I know that there were even more different colored Cylons. Okay, they're not really Cylons, they're just robots. But they were Cylons to me as a kid. And the red ones were just the beginning. Berzerk, or as I also referred to it back in the day, that Cylon game, had me hooked and wouldn't let go. The simple but striking painted graphics on the side of the machine, along with a cooler and larger black joystick, made it a visual treat. And of course, the pièce de résistance was the real digitized voiced robots that sounded like Cylons from the TV show. It took things to a whole other level. It was the first video game I'd ever heard real voices coming from, so it was a big deal. Eventually, Berzerk came home to my Atari 2600 console, and I couldn't wait to get it. I did brace for some disappointment, as I knew the Atari couldn't accurately replicate the arcade versions of games I loved, but it was a decent port, with great graphics, and I had fun playing it. But to me, Berzerk just isn't Berzerk without the Cylon voices. And what's crazy is, someone was able to hack the cartridge decades later and add in the voices, meaning it was possible to do. And the new company calling themselves Atari recently released an officially licensed version of the Atari 2600 Berzerk cartridge they called the Enhanced Edition, which also included voice samples. If Atari would have done this back when I was a kid, my happiness would have been off the chart. Wiggly indeed. Berzerk machines in arcades around me were quickly disappearing. Eventually I wouldn't be able to find one at all. I remember seeing one here and there for a while, but they eventually all vanished. This is why I vowed, if I ever did see one again, I would make sure to play it. I remember after college discovering a little program for the PC called MAME, Multiple Arcade Machine Emulator. It ran through a command prompt on my Windows machine, and it used my keyboard for control. I found a couple of games which were called ROMs, and one of them was Berzerk. I followed the instructions on how to get everything to run, and was finally able to play this fantastic game once again. But though everything looked and controlled like the arcade, well, clumsily, because I was using a keyboard, this version had no Cylon voices either, and what's worse, it had no sound at all. Eventually I found out I needed something called an audio sample pack, which included all the sounds. I was eventually able to find one and place it into the proper folder, and Berzerk came to life. The evil Cylon voices were now in full effect, and all in the comfort of my home. But again, the keyboard was a far cry from that amazing big joystick. I eventually came across a company called Hanaho Games, who were making arcade cabinets you could hook a PC to and play games on MAME using their commercial arcade controls. They made cabinets for both Sega and Capcom, so it sounded like good quality. I got one, and man, it didn't disappoint. It was great to finally be able to play Berzerk again, the way I remembered it in the arcade. Well, minus the cool side art and the bigger joystick. However, the joysticks were so good on the Hanaho cabinet that they felt like a commercial Berzerk machine. The biggest problem I faced with the Hanaho cabinet was its weight. It was built with commercial-grade arcade materials and came with a heavy CRT monitor. And believe it or not, it even had an optional riser. But the two-piece design didn't help with the overall weight issue because the main cabinet was so heavy on its own. At the time, that wasn't a big deal, as I never imagined owning more than one cabinet, and definitely didn't have the slightest thought to ever building an actual arcade full of machines in my house. But when I moved to my new place, the full understanding of the weight of the machine became apparent. This would be a problem anytime I wanted to move it. But then a company called Arcade 1UP hit the scene with the promise of smaller and lighter consumer-grade arcade machines for the home. These machines would also be fully licensed, so my head started dreaming up all sorts of possibilities. And maybe, just maybe, an official Berzerk machine might see a release. I'd been playing the game unofficially for years because up till then, no one would release the arcade game in any official capacity, software or hardware, and I could no longer find an original machine in an arcade. The mere possibility of Berzerk coming out in a way that best represented its original appearance made me wiggle with glee. Arcade 1UP encouraged people to give them suggestions for cabinets we'd like them to make, and of the 4 I initially suggested, one of them was Berzerk. Most of their first machines had 4 games, so I suggested these Stern classics for the cabinet: Berzerk, Frenzy, Scramble, and Super Cobra. When I got my first Arcade 1UP machine, the Atari Deluxe 12-in-1, the quality was so poor that I didn't think Arcade 1UP could pull off a decent version of a Berzerk cabinet. And because this game was so important to me, I decided to look elsewhere. Another company at the time, Rec Room Masters, looked to compete with Arcade 1UP in this new smaller form factor arena and created a 3/4 scale version of their own called the Alpha-Cade. It was constructed with thicker materials, more similar to a commercial machine, built like a tank, and had a control deck with full commercial grade arcade sticks and buttons. All Suzo Hap, baby. It was also wider than an Arcade 1UP, so 2 people could sit comfortably side by side and play on it. I say sit, because Rec Room Masters didn't make a riser for the Alpha-Cade. Think around the same height as a first-gen Arcade 1UP without a riser. The Alpha-Cade was 46 inches tall. Now someone could make their own riser, of course, but I didn't mind having a sit-down cabinet in my arcade. And many more seem to be feeling the same way as of late, as candy cabs, sit-down machines popular in Japan, seem to be making a buzz in the home arcade community right now. A company called Unico created their own 3/4 scale version of a candy cab, structured from metal, called the Nova Blast. One could think of the Alpha-Cade as a similar product, instead made out of wood. I purchased the Alpha-Cade for $350, and like the upcoming Unico Nova Blast, it's meant as an arcade shell, something to put whatever you want into it. It doesn't come with any type of CPU or a game system, no games included. The Alpha-Cade also doesn't come with a monitor, whereas the Nova Blast does. And the Nova Blast monitor can be positioned in 2 different orientations, a very cool and versatile design. But I think for the Alpha-Cade's price, it makes sense that there isn't one included. The Alpha-Cade does come with the aforementioned and amazing Suzo Hap control deck, all pre-wired with 2 joysticks and 6 action buttons on each side, and some other buttons for miscellaneous functions. The Unico Nova Blast comes with a quality control deck as well, pre-wired with 2 joysticks and 8 action buttons on each side, with some additional buttons and a volume knob. However, instead of using Suzo Hap, the Nova Blast sports Sanwa controls. For me, Sanwa just isn't my jam. Their joysticks always feel too loose to me, and their buttons don't have enough play or click. Not that they don't perform or play well, they do. I just like the more robust feeling of Suzo Hap, what I remember playing on in commercial arcades I grew up in. In any case, both machines show quality here. The Nova Blast also comes with more connection options and built-in speakers, which aren't included on the Alpha-Cade, but the price also factors in here, especially if you want to use the Nova Blast as a full arcade cabinet experience. The Nova Blast itself is a bar top, meaning you'll either need to build your own base or get an optional one from Unico. As of the making of this video, the Nova Blast bar top alone is $999, pretty much $1,000, but with the base, at its most cost-effective in a combo SKU, will set you back just south of $1,200, and you also have to factor in shipping, whereas shipping was free on the Alpha-Cade at the time I purchased it. There are enough differences to call the Alpha-Cade and Nova Blast two separate products, but they do essentially provide a similar experience. Some of my review categories wouldn't apply to a cabinet like the Alpha-Cade because it's missing key elements I grade on, but I'll review those sections based upon part recommendations provided by Rec Room Masters on their site when I bought mine. I picked up the 19-inch TV they had listed, which was $60 from Best Buy at the time, and that will serve as the picture and sound for the cabinet. However, and I know this might seem inconsequential, but anyone who knows me, or has gotten to know me better through my channel welcome video, knows it's important to me to always deliver true statements. And pertaining to some of my past conversations regarding the Alpha-Cade, I'm thinking I might have misspoke and provided incorrect stats of the TV I bought for mine. I'm hoping I didn't misspeak, but if I did, I want this video to serve as correction for this and everything regarding this cabinet, and provide full definitive stats and prices. My Alpha-Cade has a 19-inch Insignia branded TV with a resolution of 720p. I remember choosing it because that resolution is more than adequate for classic arcade games from the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and that lower resolution also provided a cheaper price. For the brains of the Alpha-Cade, Rec Room Masters suggested a Raspberry Pi, along with a free download of their emulation build. It didn't come with any ROMs, which was fine, but I was looking for a more plug-and-play solution with everything set up out of the box. I found a seller on eBay who sold the best version of the Pi hardware at the time, a 3B Plus, and also used the same software Rec Room Masters used as their base. The seller included a huge library of games, and according to them, was ready to plug in a controller and play after turning on. Their setup, with the case I got, cost me $90. The final piece, a custom Berzerk art package, side and marquee art, which I'll talk about, but it won't factor into the look of the cabinet score, as it wasn't a Rec Room Masters recommendation, cost me an additional $120. So all in, this cabinet cost me $620 with free shipping, fully working and skinned. So is this the Berzerk cabinet I've been longing for? Let's find out. The look of the cabinet. The Alpha-Cade looks amazing assembled. It's all black, the perfect blank canvas for anyone looking to transform it into the machine of their dreams, but looks great without art as well. For those who do want a little bit of flair, without spending any extra money, Rec Room Masters includes some generic side and marquee art in the box. I didn't use it, of course, but it actually looks good, and I think anyone who uses it will be happy. There's also pre-applied art on the control panel, and it looked so good to me that I didn't replace it with any Berzerk art. One thing that might turn off some from this machine is no light-up marquee. Light-up marquees for me are something cool to have, but not a necessity. If I have a choice, I'll take a light-up marquee every time, but it's not crucial. Like I mentioned, I got a custom art package for Berzerk, which included a sticker for the marquee area, and it looks great, even if it's not lit up. The Berzerk side art also looks amazing, and I like the custom job the company I went with did. However, what I received from them was quite different than what I was led to believe, so I won't be promoting them. It made it a chore to line everything up and apply it, but thankfully, it all worked out in the end. Cabinet structure and assembly. Like I said before, this machine is built like a tank, and it won't move or wobble when you play on it. The material thickness is close to, if not the same to, a commercial machine, and it comes with real T-molding. I wouldn't say building it was fun, but it wasn't a chore like an arcade 1-up. There is one major flaw though when it comes to the design of the Alpha-Cade, something I can't ignore. The lack of access to the back or the side of the TV once you have the machine put together. You'll need to plug in everything you want before you close it all up. If you don't, you'll be taking this thing apart just to have access to the ports. I pray that none of my cables come loose or go bad, because I don't ever want to disassemble the machine. This is a huge bummer, and something that should have been caught in the design phase. One other thing to note when choosing a display for the Alpha-Cade, make sure it comes with a remote. The screen is behind plexiglass, so you won't be able to access the power button. You could, however, just not install the plexi, but I think it would take away from the look of the cabinet, as most arcade machines use this type of display covering. Physical controls. As I mentioned a few times now, Suzo Hap, baby. Tight and springy joysticks and satisfying clicking buttons will make you want to play on this machine. This is by far the best machine control-wise in my entire arcade. It's great to have at least one machine with actual real feel controls, just like I remember from commercial arcades. Because of Alpha-Cade's existence, Arcade 1-Up should be ashamed for claiming anything near real feel in most of their advertising. Picture quality. The TV recommended by Rec Room Masters does a great job and has a fantastic picture. It's a widescreen, so not the ideal aspect ratio for many classic games, but everything still looks great on it. The TV also has plenty of ports, 2 HDMI and 1 composite. And that composite definitely came in handy when it came to connecting my jack-specific Atari paddle controller into it. This not only brings the best Atari 2600 game into my arcade, but one of the greatest games of all time, Breakout. And some might be wondering why someone would include a console game in an arcade. Well, it's very simple in this case. The Atari 2600 version of Breakout, again being one of the greatest games of all time, is far superior to its arcade counterpart. A must-have for any arcade, and with the correct paddle controller, of course. And though the jack-specific version can be hard to find, it's no longer made as far as I know. The company currently known as Atari has made an updated version of the 2600 console called the Atari 2600 Plus, with a cartridge and paddle add-on you can purchase separately that includes this amazing version of Breakout. Now, I haven't played that specific iteration, so I can't outright recommend it. But I know if I didn't have my jack-specific version, I would personally take a chance because the game is that damn good. Oh wait, let me get back on track. Sound. The sound from the TV doesn't quite get as loud as I'd like, but it still sounds decent. I pretty much have to turn it all the way up when my other machines are on in the arcade, but it gets the job done. The TV does have an audio out port to plug in additional speakers, but unfortunately, I didn't think about it before completing the build. I'm now kicking myself because, as I stated before, I'd have to take the machine apart to plug one in. Damn that design flaw. Games and gameplay. The hardware and software Rec Room Masters recommended for gaming on their system is decent. As I mentioned before, I bought a setup that matched their specifications off of eBay. The build I purchased came with over 15,000 games, including full console libraries, so if I ever fancy that type of gameplay, it's ready for that as well. The build also includes the 4 Stern games I mentioned before, the the ones I wanted to see on an Arcade 1-Up Berzerk cabinet, and I'm happy to say they all play great. And this is the perfect cabinet if you want to get your twin stick on, as both Robotron and Black Widow play like a dream. This is the way these games should be played, on Suzo Hap, baby. Now the build I purchased is a ROM dump, for sure. And there are some games that won't run well, or run at all. And some that won't configure to work with the Rec Room Masters control deck, like Smash TV and Total Carnage. A huge bummer, given the high quality of the Alpha-Cade's twin sticks. And fighting games that use 6 buttons, I don't even touch, as I haven't found even one configured correctly to the almost universally understood button layout. And to add insult to injury, I've only been able to configure games one at a time. And configuring itself is a pain in the ass because of the system's cryptic and clumsy method. Now there may be different ways to do it, but I'm not about to give up precious gaming time to fumble through menus and set options. I'm sure a PC build with MAME would fix these issues and make things easier, and maybe I'll go that route someday. But for now, there is more than enough to satisfy me here, and enough games I didn't have to configure. A very economical and acceptable option. The great thing about the Alpha-Cade is you can plug pretty much anything into it that uses an HDMI and USB. And the control panel, if you decide to use it, seems to be recognized by any device I plugged into it and often needs little to no configuration. Plug in a Pi, PC, PlayStation, Xbox, Switch, Evercade, Steam Deck, any number of mini consoles, so many possibilities. And a quick aside, Rec Room Masters also used to offer a JAMA version of the Alpha-Cade, all with the connections needed to attach JAMA boards and devices, opening the possibility of playing commercial arcade systems on the cabinet. And speaking of JAMA, Unico's Nova Blast comes with both HDMI, USB, and JAMA capabilities, offering the best of both worlds in a single package. Customer support. I only contacted Rec Room Masters support twice, and they were friendly and responsive. The first time I called them, I asked them if they were going to make a riser for the Alpha-Cade. They said no, because they designed the Alpha-Cade specifically as a sit-down cabinet, and they had other cabinets available designed for stand-up play. The second time I called them was when I couldn't get the control panel to work optimally with the Pi system I purchased. We eventually figured it out. It was something I set up wrong, but they were very courteous and helpful. Great customer service. Other annoyances beyond what I've already discussed? Only one, but very minor, and it won't cost them a Mr. Pickle here. I would have loved to see Rec Room Masters at least make a riser as an option for the Alpha-Cade. Yes, they told me they have stand-up cabinet options to choose from, but none of their stand-up options were in the 3/4 scale size. Not having a riser for the Alpha-Cade isn't a big deal to me, as again, I don't mind having a sit-down cabinet in my home arcade. I think it's actually cool. But I have to wonder, would Rec Room Masters have sold more of these if they offered a riser? Is the cabinet fun? Yes, sirree, Bob. Playing with commercial buttons and sticks really makes a difference. Lesser controls can be serviceable, but man does it up the fun factor to play on the real deal. Value for price. $620 may seem steep for some for a fully functional and personally themed arcade cabinet, but I'm one who's willing to pay more for quality, within reason of course. And if you leave off the art package I bought for mine, and keep with similar display and CPU specs, you'd be more or less around $500 for a complete working multicade. And that's something Arcade 1-Up has never matched in quality or value at that price point in a similar control configuration. I think $350 as a base price for the Alpha-Cade is an absolute bargain. Now without further ado, let's pickle this one. So, adding up the tally of all the categories, how many Mr. Pickles does Rec Room Masters Alpha-Cade get? 9 Mr. Pickles out of 10. Get it. If you can find it. Unfortunately, Rec Room Masters no longer sells the Alpha-Cade. The company went out of business for a time, and when they came back, it was no longer offered. And this is a shame, because I feel the Alpha-Cade is the standard of quality we should all demand from our 3/4 scale cabinets. I think it's the perfect time for the Alpha-Cade to re-emerge, as I think it might be a great alternative for some to the pricier Unico Nova Blast. My suggestion to the community is, if you want the Alpha-Cade, to reach out to Rec Room Masters and let them know. Maybe an online petition is in order? I definitely want Rec Room Masters to know in this video that I think the Alpha-Cade deserves another run. I not only think it would provide healthy competition in the new 3/4 scale candy cab space, but the Alpha-Cade itself is just a damn good cabinet. And I would also suggest making a riser for it this time, as you could give Arcade 1-Up and other competitors a run for their money with an option to make it taller. And with Arcade 1-Up possibly ditching risers altogether for their new one-piece designs, you could scoop up some of their customers who still crave a more modular and easy to move and situate two-piece design. In the meantime, one could always keep their eye out for an Alpha-Cade on eBay and other marketplaces. If you could get one in good condition, and at the right price, the Alpha-Cade is a no-brainer. The build and quality controls that come with the Alpha-Cade, along with a proper display and everything it takes to make games run on it properly, should be the minimum standard when it comes to every 3/4 scale arcade machine. The mere existence of the Alpha-Cade tells on companies like Arcade 1-Up, showing you can have high caliber parts without breaking the bank. And that of course doesn't nullify the cost of licenses. But even when licenses have been attached, Arcade 1-Up proved it themselves. They only had to raise the price of their limited edition Marvel Superheroes cabinet by $100 in order to put in quality sticks and buttons and a cheap and simple light box for a light-up marquee. And looking out of curiosity at the prices of these parts a la carte back in the day, which is more expensive than the bulk buy ability Arcade 1-Up has, they still made a profit, because all of the compatible parts combined came to around $85, which then significantly reduces because Arcade 1-Up buys in bulk. But I'd take the $100 hit every time if it meant getting quality in all the right places out of the box without having to buy and install better parts myself. Arcade 1-Up instead, to this day, continues to raise their prices, giving us useless stuff like light-up coin doors, stools, and tin signs that cost them even less, and don't improve on the really important things that make the gaming experience itself great, like high-quality sticks and buttons. This is why I initially gave up on Arcade 1-Up at the very beginning of my home arcade journey and went straight to another company, Rec Room Masters. The Alpha-Cade was actually my second cabinet in my home arcade, and at the time, I thought it might be my last, because I didn't want to have to create every cabinet I wanted from scratch. If it weren't for a significant invention from a guy named Glenn, from the YouTube channel Glenn's Retro Show, with his quality spinner that replaced the abomination part used on Arcade 1-Up's Atari Deluxe 12-in-1, I wouldn't have bought another cabinet. I wanted licensed consumer 3/4 scale machines, and Arcade 1-Up was the only game in town at the time. Glenn became the safety net that many of us relied on when Arcade 1-Up decided to cheap out on controls. From the very beginning of my home arcade journey, utilizing consumer-grade 3/4 scale machines, spurred on by rhetoric laid down by the first player in the game, Arcade 1-Up, I expected every cabinet I purchased to at least be an acceptable experience, which at bare minimum was to look, sound, play, and feel as I remember, or very close to what I remember, in commercial arcades. I also wanted enough value in the amount of games on a cabinet due to the space they took up, and that made sense for each cabinet's specific built-in control scheme. I never expected smaller, one-to-one creations of commercial machines using consumer-grade parts and prices. That's crazy. But I knew if companies really cared about the products they were crafting, they could choose to make them with the right amount of quality and at a reasonable price. And that's been proven on more than one occasion. Some cabinets didn't skimp on essential parts, were priced at an appropriate amount without overinflating, and delivered authentic feels for the home. The Alpha-Cade is proof of this, as is Arcade 1-Up's Atari Star Wars, and in most parts, iArcade Space Ace, just to name a few. Now, would I rather have had the Alpha-Cade be a fully plug-and-play licensed system with everything included in the box? Of course. The time it took to get everything up and running and looking the way I wanted it to on the Alpha-Cade wasn't fun. Worth it and doable, but not fun. But the question is, how long does someone have to wait to get a decent cabinet they want? And should we have to wait? And I definitely don't think that we should have to settle for substandard crap. The unfortunate truth I found in my home arcade journey was if I really wanted a particular cabinet, I may have to create it myself. But luckily, there are so many companies and entrepreneurs out there helping the community make their own individual dreams come true. And in the case of my Berzerk cabinet, Rec Room Masters provided an amazing sculpt to work with. As of the making of this video, Arcade 1-Up, nor any of its competitors, have come out with a licensed 3/4 scale Berzerk machine. And my request to Arcade 1-Up was back in 2018. I'm glad I chose not to wait for all the necessary players to figure it out. I wanted Berzerk, and the Cylons have been churning out fun and excitement for years now in my home arcade. One last bit of cool news before I wrap this up. As of the making of this video, a company finally brought a licensed arcade version of Berzerk home. New Wave Toys. Their 1/6 scale replica now sits atop my Berzerk Alpha-Cade and completes the full Berzerk experience I've been longing for. Thank you, New Wave Toys. And thank you, Rec Room Masters. For those who would like to see more of what the Alpha-Cade looks like, I'm paying it forward and leaving a link below to a video I've enjoyed in the past showcasing it. I'll also leave a link to my Welcome to the VideoGameVegas Arcade, where you can see more of it there as well. And with that, safe travels everyone. And remember, you always have a right to your opinion, but only I have a right to mine. Until next time, stay wiggly, my friends.